All right. I'm just doing a little dance in the intro music we got now. We're getting fancy. Well, welcome into Inside the Hedges. I guess this is episode 4. I am here with Taylor McCarg, former Rice football quarterback. I, of course, am Matthew Bartlett, editor and managing director of The Roost. We are here to quickly talk about the game that wasn't and then proceed, hopefully, to Rice's game this weekend up against Louisiana Tech, which, as of right now, we are live. The game is still scheduled to go on. So how are you, Taylor? And how was your football list Saturday?
Good. Yeah, it was weird. I mean, I was in Houston. Obviously, I'd gotten my COVID test done and was sitting around doing some prep on Friday and got the call. And I ended up being, that Saturday, I watched a ton of college football, but obviously wish they could have got that game in. We'll see if it gets rescheduled. But I know, it's just part of the game right now. I think everybody's dealing with this. You look at what's happening with the SEC right now. Cancellations are just a part, and postponements are just a part of the year for everybody.
Yeah, are we going to start calling up like the replacements? Is Sewanee going to get to play LSU this week? No, I guess LSU's out. Alabama's free. So
Alabama's free. Yeah.
Who knows? That'd be an interesting game. Why not? A throwback. But yes, of course. We alluded to it. Rice and UTSA, that game got called off on Friday with, I guess it ended up being reportedly only 2 positive tests at UTSA, but contact tracing taking down position units below the necessary count to play kind of put that game under. So that was one scheduling note for last week. And then that, of course, things couldn't be easy. Conference USA also last week added Marshall on December 5th and UAB on December 12th to the Rice schedule. Again, this is 2020. Everything is fluid and contingent. But as of right now, that's what the schedule looks like. And, we probably, if the game had been played against UTSA, would have been talking about what Rice and Marshall and UAB look like in a couple weeks. But what's kind of your read on how December plays out? We're a long way from that, but how December plays out for Rice.
Yeah, the Marshall game is interesting because Conference USA values these teams getting as many matchups as they can on their side of the division. Marshall's obviously they're the premier team in CUSA right now on both sides, ranked, playing extremely well, the top 5 in scoring defense in the country. And if you're Rice, there's the potential that the UTSA game gets put into that slot and they don't play Marshall, which I think this Rice team has proven they might have a chance to be in the mix for CUSA West down the stretch, where they would potentially avoid playing Marshall on December 5th and then play them in the conference championship. But both of those teams in December, Marshall and UAB, are 2 of the better teams in Conference USA. And it'll be interesting to see what Conference USA does with scheduling down the stretch.
Yeah, it was interesting that they ended up putting the games on the schedule with the postponements that had already been in place. And like you said, those are the 2 hardest games. And press conferences this week after the game, UTSA head coach Jeff Traylor and Rice head coach Mike Bloomgren both were emphatically clear that on December 5th, they want to be playing each other. And Bloomgren doesn't want to be playing Marshall. Obviously, there's the regional, and you can speak to this, playing college football in Texas. It's a different beast than going out to West Virginia. So that's a plus. But like you mentioned, it certainly would be nice to play a UTSA team that is, 500, has been some good, some bad, versus Marshall, who has steamrolled just about everybody at this point.
Yeah, I think if you ask the kids in the building and the coaching staff, I don't know that they would they're not going to shy away from Marshall. I think it's more your first point that they want to play UTSA. It's that team, UTSA's kind of become a rival, even though they've only been playing football for about 10 years. I think that matchup matters for CUSA West. It matters to these kids. These kids played against each other, a lot of them in high school, and it matters to both of those programs. I think UTSA, regardless of even some of the down years for Rice, that was always an important game for them to win. And Coach Traylor in our production call early in the week last week said, it's an important game for them. And so I think both programs would like to see, obviously, that one get added back. And like you alluded to, those coaches have made mention of that already.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add, especially in Conference USA, like geographically, it's so spread out. To have the Texas teams near each other and to be able to build those rivalries. Of course, Rice needs to do their part and start winning some of those games to make those competitive. But like you mentioned, the relationships there, the smack talks there, and regardless of the ranking, it would be nice to see UTSA on the schedule. So we might get to, well, I guess we've already previewed that game, but we'll probably talk a little bit more about it if we get there again. And in lieu of talking more UTSA, we do want to jump forward a little bit and talk about Louisiana Tech. They also thought they were going to be playing last weekend, and they too had a game canceled because of COVID. So both teams with the same impromptu bye week, if you will. So there's even heading there, but Louisiana Tech entering this game at 4-3, second place, I believe, right now in the Conference USA standings. What do we make of these Bulldogs?
Yeah, La Tech's had an interesting season for a couple of reasons. I think the only game really that they've been blown out in that got away from them was BYU, and BYU's playing at a really high level across the board. They've had some tough losses. They hosted Marshall. Marshall won that game pretty convincingly, but even in that game, they played pretty tough. They're a tough team to run away from. You go back and watch their game against UTSA. They're winning most of the game. They're winning in the fourth quarter by 2 touchdowns, and I think it's 27-14 midway through the fourth quarter, and UTSA gets hot and scores back-to-back touchdowns and ultimately wins 28-27. So they're used to playing and comfortable playing close football. They still have some youth, and we'll break them down a little bit in detail moving forward in a minute. But just going through their schedule, you realize they're a team they're trying to figure it out like some of these other young teams. They remind me a little bit of UTSA that we talked about last week, that it's just trying to figure out how to close games out because they're there. They're very similar to Rice in some ways. How do you close teams out in the fourth quarter? How do you play if you got the lead? How do you close people out? And their win over UAB was a huge step forward in that direction.
Yeah, and it's interesting with Louisiana Tech because the more and more I look at them, I know that they have so many pieces that are different. Jamar Smith is not there. They have a 2-quarterback system that we'll get to, but in many ways, it kind of feels like Skip Holtz, and this is a credit to him, and I guess where Mike Bloomgren is heading to. Like, I feel like we know almost to a T what we're going to get from Louisiana Tech. Like, they're going to put up points and they're going to be physical on defense, and it just whoever is that quarterback or running back or wide receiver or defensive back, like they have a pretty clear identity, which especially in the West right now in Conference USA, that's worth something.
They do have a clear identity and they're trying to get back to it. They're struggling a little bit on offense. They're not playing great on offense, even in some of these games where you see them score in the high 20s and 30s in points. Go back to the UAB game. The beginning of that game, they stall, have to kick a field goal on their first drive, and then they have an interception. Louisiana Tech picks off UAB, runs it all the way back to the 2-yard line, and they don't score. They go for it on 4th down and don't get it. And I think that's some of the issues that you're seeing where you alluded to the 2-quarterback system. If you're Rice, that's exactly what you want, is to force them into keeping both quarterbacks engaged, because if anybody out there, aside from the Florida Chris Leak and Tim Tebow days, there are very few offenses in college football that performed well truly with 2 quarterbacks. There's a Wildcat package, which is different, but Louisiana Tech truly has 2 guys that they're running out there. Aaron Allen and Luke Anthony are playing snaps at quarterback and running more or less the same offense. It's not like one of them comes out there and runs the ball particularly well, and the other one is more the downfield passer. They keep more or less the same play calling. So if you're Rice, force them into that. Keep them rotating these quarterbacks, because that means that one or the other isn't playing particularly well.
Yeah, I believe Luke Anthony had the big game against Houston Baptist earlier this year where they put up 66 points. But other than that, it's one of those things, and maybe, watching Rice the past couple of years, we've always wished that you'd have one guy separate. But for Tech, I think that really is the reason that they have 2 guys in right now, because neither guy has really has taken it and run away with it. The UTSA game, which we talked about a little bit, Skip made a quarterback change on the last drive of the game. that, how often does that result in success?
Well, it's one of my least favorite. I went through it as a player, and Rice fans out there that watched that stretch, that was it was incredibly frustrating. Where you have a really short leash, where you make one mistake in a game, and you're looking over your shoulder, wondering, hey, is my backup coming in? It's hard to get settled, and so again, if you're Rice, force them into that. Try and figure out. Coaches love to try and go to who has the hot hand, but really all that leads to, in my mind, is indecision. And the team rallies around, any team, doesn't matter, Conference USA, wherever, high school, college, pro, they rally around specific guys. And that's how you start to create a divided locker room, is when you have multiple quarterbacks and they're rotating in and out. I think what Coach Bloomgren's done right now has been phenomenal with keeping Giovanni engaged, but he's still the clear backup, because Giovanni's the future, I think, at quarterback right now for Rice. If you look at his production early in his career, they're building and molding him to be the guy down the line. But right now, Mike Collins is playing at a really high level. So he's your one, and you have complementary packages for Giovanni. But getting in this system that La Tech's in right now, I think, is a detriment to their offense. When you see one series Allen's in and the next series Anthony's in, it's just, you got to find some sort of consistency.
Yeah, and we'll stick around on the offensive side of the ball a little bit, because they do have Adrian Hardy, who had a bit of a down year at wideout for them last year, but is still, local kid and really productive and talented playmaker on the outside. But other than him, Justin Henderson was a name in the running game that had a lot of, praise coming into the season, but he's been pretty quiet. Israel Tucker has come on. Neither of them are really, and I guess partly the offensive line, they're not getting a push in the running game. And so it really is falling on these quarterbacks. Is that simple for Rice, as we kind of expect, shut down the running game and make these guys throw?
Louisiana Tech right now is missing shot plays, which in the past you came to expect. They're going to hit their home run, their shots. They're going to get the ball downfield. Right now, it feels like they're really having to grind out drives. Go back to the UTSA game, I felt like there was a lot of that. They struggled to convert on 3rd and long, get ahead of the sticks, and then get the ball downfield. And right now, that's what you're seeing. Their defense is doing a fantastic job getting takeaways. They're giving Louisiana Tech some short fields. They got to figure out how to capitalize on that. And then, like you mentioned, figure out how to get more production in the run game, get ahead of the sticks. That way you can set up those second and short. That's the blueprint to get the ball downfield and take your shot plays.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned those shot plays. I was doing a little bit of research this week, and Louisiana Tech, through 7 games, they're averaging roughly 3 plays of 20 yards a game, which 20 yards, doesn't sound too big, but when you think about this offense, you think about, they hit the home run ball. And they just haven't been doing that this year. Actually, Rice, through 2 games, granted, they have 10 plays of 20 yards or more. So Rice is roughly twice as explosive than Louisiana Tech, which is maybe not what we'd have thought coming into the year, but that's certainly, which we've talked about, puts the advantage back on the offensive side for Rice, which might be a first in the series history in recent memory, at least since Bloomgren's been there.
Yeah, you got to have it. We had a graphic on in the Middle Tennessee game that showed Rice's explosive plays last year in the first 9 games and then in the last 3 games. And they had something like 13 explosive plays in the last 3 games that they won. It's so important. It's so hard at any level, but especially in college, to have those 12, 15 play sustained drives where you're getting 6 and 7 yard chunks at a time. You've got to have big plays downfield that break up the drive and create momentum. That's the other piece, that it's hard to slog your way down the field. But when you hit that shot play, that 40-yard pass or that 25, 30-yard run, that's where you build momentum and you get some tempo out of that. And so La Tech's just got to find some more of that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's helped with that is the aggressiveness that their defense has been playing with. Louisiana Tech right now, 2nd in Conference USA and takeaways. They have 12 through 7 games, a turnover margin of, about +1 a game. So more often than not, their defense is giving them that extra opportunity. We saw that, in their games against UAB, and really making the most of those chances. That you probably have that questionable goal line call is going to ruffle some people the wrong way in Ruston. But that's been a part of the equation that, the Rice defense has been after, getting those takeaways and making it a lot easier. Is that something that, Louisiana Tech has just figured out a formula for, and that Rice is going to have to be extra careful about? I mean, they were second in the conference last year in takeaways. Is Louisiana Tech a takeaway machine?
They have 11 interceptions in the last 12 games, and their DBs are just always around the ball. And it is something that got to be cognizant of every week, but especially against this La Tech defense. To me, go back and watch the UAB game. UAB figured out in the second half, we can run more or less at will on these guys, and that's what they did. They were on the ground and pound, and a lot of downhill between the tackles running as well. It wasn't where, they weren't having to do fly sweeps and jet sweeps and run their quarterback. It was, hey, we're going to either get out of the pistol or in shotgun and run some sort of zone between the tackles and right downhill at you. And they found a lot of success doing that. For this game this week, expect the game plan, as it sort of always is for Rice, but establishing that run on first and second down, especially on first down. Rice has already made a living out of doing that. I think you'll see more of that. And I would expect this is going to be, for Juma especially, this sets up to be a matchup that favors his running style really nicely. Run between the tackles, make your one cut, get vertical, and go. And I think the game plan for Rice, which has been get ahead of the sticks, have production on first down, make sure you're getting more than just a yard or two on first down, and then give Collins play action, move him around a little bit. I think that sets up really nicely for what La Tech has shown on film the last few weeks.
Yeah, this is a team they're going to take some chances and they will make mistakes in the secondary on defense, but they don't get pressure at the line of scrimmage, maybe like they have in years past. They have averaged roughly about, 5 tackles for a loss per game. They're not really getting it done too much, especially against that running game, like you mentioned, against UAB. And Rice was able to control basically the entire fourth quarter against Southern Miss with the football. This is a situation where, as good as Louisiana Tech has been, if Rice has another second half lead, it could be dicey for, last year it took an overtime comeback, and we might not get there if Rice has the advantage.
Yeah, I also think if you're Rice's defense, you want Louisiana Tech having to throw the ball, because right now that's the weakest part of their offense, and that's why you're seeing 2 quarterbacks come in the game. If they had a dynamic passer and they were forcing the ball downfield and completing their shot plays, you wouldn't see a rotation at all at quarterback. Louisiana Tech loves quick passes, getting it out of their quarterback's hands quickly, not having to think through full field reads, getting to second and third reads. It's a lot of, hey, get the bubble outside. Okay, here's the slant concept. Really simple, one read, get it out of the hand quickly. They roll the pocket a little bit for some of their shot plays. But if you're Rice, you want to force them. Don't be surprised if you see a lot of pressure early to try and get after both of these quarterbacks and make them beat you over the top, which is what the game plan was for Asher O'Hara against Middle Tennessee. And Asher O'Hara answered the bell. They threw the ball really well. So this young secondary will get tested again, but I think in order to win and win convincingly, you want Louisiana Tech to force you to beat you through the air.
Yeah, and then one thing that we haven't really hit on yet, but it would be, we need to mention, especially with that being kind of the game plan we'd expect Rice to go with. There's a good chance that Rice is going to get a lot of reinforcements back in the secondary this week at Bloomgren's, midweek press conference. He said that Trayshawn Chamberlain, Kirk Lockhart, safeties are both expected to get back to play this week. Andrew Byrd, who, we thought would have been a starting corner entering the year. He's hopefully going to be back. There's a couple of guys. Jason White should be back as well. Kebron Page on the front 7. It's not often that you get, what I list off, 5 guys back on your defense that are going to be significant contributors. And if the Rice defense with true freshmen and redshirt freshmen playing extremely well could silence Jack Abraham, one of Conference USA's better passers. I'm trying not to be too optimistic, but what's not Asher O'Hara, but either of the Louisiana Tech quarterbacks going to do against the revamped Rice secondary?
Yeah, this game really has the potential to be a low-scoring game because I think both defenses are really the strength of both of these teams. For Rice, you talked about all the guys coming back. If that's the case and you get even half of the names that you just mentioned back, expect a lot of pressure. Expect them to get after. This Rice defense is already known for doing a good job mixing up their looks and mixing up their blitz packages in secondary and coverage in secondary. If you get some guys that have played meaningful snaps back, expect more of that. And then on the flip side, something similar for Louisiana Tech, they're going to – Skip Holtz alluded to earlier in the week, they've got some starters that are returning. They had a few guys out due to contact tracing a couple of weeks ago against UAB that they're going to have back this week. So I would expect both of these – the defenses, like we mentioned, are the strengths of both of these teams, I think, right now. I would expect that this could be a low-scoring game.
So low scoring for this new Rice offense, is that 28 points instead of 30, or are we looking at like a 20 to 14 battle again?
Yeah, when I say low scoring Conference USA, I mean neither offense is scoring in the 30s, right? I mean, this isn't going to be an NFC East 10-7 game, but I would expect, barring some turnovers on one side of the ball or the other for either team. Yeah, something like a 21-13 type of final where neither team's running away and they're playing good physical defense. And Rice always prides itself on taking care of the football and trying to force other teams to create turnovers. And that's what you saw against Southern Miss, and I imagine that's going to be the same thing this week.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd think so. And we've talked a little bit about the good things we've seen so far, and then kind of close things out. 2 games, it's not a lot in the grand scheme of things. Of course, we have no idea how many games Rice is going to be playing this season. We hope it's 9, 10, get to a conference championship game and a bowl game. But we're working with what we got. Is there anything left, offense, defense from Rice that you have seen a little bit or haven't seen this year so far that you're kind of curious whether or not it's we're going to pull out a new trick or a player or two that you kind of keeping your eye on for bigger things that could break out to some degree against Louisiana Tech?
I would just expect, if you're a Rice fan, to see them give Mike Collins more responsibility. I think he's proven the first couple of weeks that first half of Middle Tennessee, they had the clamps kind of put on him and play calling was pretty limited. And all of a sudden in the second half, when Rice got behind, they had to open the playbook a little bit. The passing game got a little more dynamic. And since then, the second half of Middle Tennessee and all of Southern Miss, you saw the ball getting into playmakers' hands a little earlier. You saw Trammell getting involved early and often. And I would imagine as the season goes along and they build trust in Mike Collins, you're going to see him, I think, really flourish in this offense because he's built for it. He looks like a pro-style guy, right? I mean, it looks like he's played in this type of system his whole life. I know he's from the East Coast, started at Penn and then at TCU. It feels like this type of offense is what he's built for. And I would imagine you're going to see more responsibility put on him and the passing game get more and more creative as the season goes along.
Yeah, I mean, all the numbers make sense. It's always going to be difficult winning in Ruston. That's something I look back that for whatever reason, that's just not been something that Rice has done in some time. So it's one of those things, we talk about the matchups, and this is another one that looks pretty good on paper for Rice, but you got to go all the way back to 2012 is the last time that Rice has won in Ruston, and you might remember a little bit about that game.
Well, I'll tell you, I know we beat them at home in 2013, but 2012 we went on the road, and that was the season La Tech actually won that game. That was the season that La Tech was rolling, 2012, and I think they won 10 or 11 games that year, and that's the year their La Tech's offensive or athletic director was holding out for a better bowl, and then they passed on, I think, the Independence Bowl. And then they were like an 11-win team and weren't in a bowl that year. That was that season for fans that remember that far back. But Ruston is a tough place to play. Ruston's a tough place to play. That is one of the you kind of feel like, and no offense to any La Tech fans that are listening to this right now, but it has a similar feel to going to like a College Station or a Lubbock. It feels like, hey, it's the only thing there. You drive, and then all of a sudden there's a college town. You feel like you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And their fans, I know capacity is different this year, but when we played there on the road, fans were rowdy. They were loud the whole game. And it's a tough place to play, but it's similar to a Southern Miss. Southern Miss is normally a tough place to play. So I think this is a mentally tough Rice team that I imagine is going to handle playing on the road no matter where they play this year. I think they'll handle it fine.
Yeah, they'll be right. I had my numbers. I will stand corrected. Last time a Rice team beat Louisiana Tech in Ruston, 2003, according to what I'm looking at. So they're due, is what we're saying. Hopefully.
Yeah,
so we will wrap things up there. We will be back. As far as we know, breaking down a Louisiana Tech game this coming weekend and looking ahead. I guess we got North Texas the week after that. But regardless what happens in the next week, we will be here next week live for you guys on Wednesdays to talk some Rice football. Where can we follow you and make sure we don't miss anything that's going on with you before we get you back in the booth?
Yeah, be back in the booth for the UTEP home game right after Thanksgiving. And then I'm not sure what the last couple weeks of the year look like, but then always active on Twitter at TMcCarg16. So that is definitely the easiest place to find me.
Yeah, go find him. If you are a Louisiana Tech fan, you could give him Ruston grief, or me too. We can take it. We promise. You can find me and my stuff at The Roost, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. As always, go ahead and make sure you subscribe on Patreon. We talked about those injury reports. It's going to be interesting to see who Rice gets back. So we'll keep you posted as best we do. We got a film room breaking down Louisiana Tech and what they do on both sides of the ball. A lot of good stuff. It is as strange as it is football season, and we're in the midst of it. So thank you guys for tuning in and listening to Inside the Hedges. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next week. Rice Fight.